First of all, just want to really welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on your Thursday morning. I really appreciate you all being here. I'm Dinah Stevens. I might be unfamiliar to some of you. Normally, another team member does these events. He is on an out-of-class position right now, and I'm the age-friendly program manager. So I started a few months ago, and I'm really enjoying the learning curve, and that includes learning from all the panelists who attend these events. So thank you for being here. We've got a great panel today. I do first want to start with a land acknowledgement, which is something that the city of Seattle does before a lot of meetings. And it's a bit new to me as I'm new to the city, but I'm really enjoying the moment of reflection and recognition. So I just would like everyone to know that the city of Seattle government recognizes that we are on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and that is past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself, as well as the Duwamish people. And you can learn more about the Duwamish tribe at duwamishtribe.org. I do encourage you to check that out. They're known as the people of the inside, and they are still here today. And please do check that out and learn more about how you can get involved as well. So with that, I am going to introduce Michael, who is going to say a few words, and then Michael and I may be tag teaming this today, as I know he is we're all trying to steal a piece of Michael today. So Michael, I'll hand it over to you first, but I do want to acknowledge who you are. So Michael is our Deputy Director here at the Human Services Department. He joined us, I think, in January, so a few months prior. So it's great to have him on board. And I know that he's someone who is personally passionate about brain health and dementia awareness and caregiver support. So I'm especially grateful that he's here today. So Michael comes to us from Georgia, where he was serving as a legislative affairs and outreach with the Georgia State Department of Human Services. He has a background in health as well as a master's in political science. So he brings a great perspective here today. He also serves as a Washington State Commissioner with the Commission on African American Affairs. And so he's bringing all of that kind of knowledge and experience and perspectives to his work at Human Services Department, and we're grateful to have him. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael to open us up and kick us off, and we'll take it from there.
All right, perfect. And if we could stay on this page, I think that really sets the tone for today's conversation. And thank you for the introduction, and also to the folks on the call, thank you for your time. My name is Michael Bailey, and I have the privilege of opening us up today. And as you're aware, this month we have an opportunity to honor and to lift up the work being done both around Alzheimer's, but also brain health awareness. And brain health it's a wide field with many important and contributing facets and factors. And today we want to focus largely on dementia, which is very common among older adults, and it affects the parts of the brain that control thought, memory, and even language in some cases. Alzheimer's disease is most common among the forms of dementia, but it's not the only one. So we do want to give voice to that. And I believe since I would say 1983, since 1983, June has been designated as National Alzheimer's and Brain Health Awareness Month. This really allows us an annual opportunity to raise awareness about Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, and to reflect on how we can best support people living with dementia. For those of you who are still learning in this space, we want to remind folks that dementia impacts more people than some might think. Around the world, there's more than 55 million people living with some form of dementia. When we look at the 65 plus population here in the US, we know that Alzheimer's affects approximately 6.2 million people. It's estimated that someone who develops the disease is doing so every 65 seconds. And, as our population continues to age, this is likely to accelerate. So we anticipate that by 2050, that number of folks living with Alzheimer's is likely to nearly double. Now, as we narrow in to the results here in Washington, we estimate that approximately 120,000 folks are living with some form of dementia. And this requires somewhat of an unofficial workforce, if you will, of nearly 300,000 family caregivers, all working to support these individuals living with dementia. As time goes by, we continue to increase our understanding and recognition of how dementia impacts certain populations and communities differently. So for example, when we look to Black older adults, we recognize that they are 2 times as likely to develop Alzheimer's as some of their non-Black counterparts. And more than 1 in 5 Black Americans living 70 or older are living with some type of Alzheimer's or some type of dementia, likely Alzheimer's. When we look to the LGBTQ plus community, we recognize that this community of older adults may experience unique challenges when trying to access support due to a number of different reasons. And for this reason, we also see this population as somewhat vulnerable to the impacts of Alzheimer's disease. The loved ones of people experiencing dementia, and most of us can, have a space in this. Most of those individuals, are deeply impacted in unique ways. And it's estimated that about 271.6 billion worth of dollars goes to unpaid caregivers that are taking time out of their work, their schedule, their lives to provide that care. And that's every year. And this equates to approximately 429 million here in the state of Washington. And this burden often falls on the shoulders of family and friends and just folks that care. So today, we're going to talk about a little bit of all of that, but we're going to do it in a very structured way. So we have some fantastic panelists who will shed some light on this intriguing and intersectional topic. They all bring a diverse and expert perspective, and that ranges from academia to government to even community groups. And because we have such a phenomenal panel, we recognize the need for a phenomenal moderator. So with that being said, I'll hand things back over to Dinah. I'll be staying on as long as I can, but to those of you who took the time to join us, just want to say thank you. For those of you who are doing this work, I truly want to say thank you. You have a very special and unique passion, and it's something that not a lot of folks can do. So for the folks that continue to do that, despite that, I just thank you for ushering this work forward. So Dinah, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for being here with us today and for your commitment on this issue. I know it's something near and dear to you, so really glad that you could be here to support this work today. And I'm secretly glad that you are getting pulled in multiple directions, and so I get to moderate because I have so many questions for our panelists. I had the privilege of getting to meet them when we were putting this together, and these are all fascinating people. So I think first I do want to just introduce everybody. So if I can figure out how to move my screen forward. There we go. So you all know Michael now. But I am going to go through each panelist's introduction. I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but I do want to make you aware of who's going to be speaking with you today. And then I'll do some question and answer with the panelists. But please do feel free for those of you on the phone to also jump in using the chat feature on Teams, or if you're on Facebook, you can add your question there and we'll route it to the panelists. I know things pop up as you're thinking of them, so no need to wait until the end. We're happy to field those as those come in. So we have Dr. Charlie Hoy Ellis today with us. He is an assistant professor at the University of Utah, the College of Social Work. And he has done a lot of research he shared with us earlier that when he started his career, there was not a lot of research around brain health in the LGBTQ community, but now there's a wealth of research out there, thanks in part to folks like Charlie, who has dedicated so many years to this. So we'll hear a little bit more about his research in more depth later. And his research is kind of building on the fact that he was a clinical social worker for many, many years, and so has that experience as well. We're also going to hear from Lionel Wang, who is a facilitator with the Washington State chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and he facilitates an LGBTQIA affirming support group for caregivers and those living with dementia. So it'll be great to have his real world experience brought into this conversation and keep us tuned into what folks are dealing with who are caregiving for those living with dementia. And last but not least, we have my colleague Karen Winston at the Division of Human Services Department in the city of Seattle. Karen is a senior planner with us, and she has been in government service for 35 years. And brain health is one of her areas of expertise. And she just yesterday launched a program that we're going to learn a bit more about from Karen. And so I was lucky enough to attend the launch, and I'm really excited for others to learn about it and to hear how that program progresses. So with that, I will kick us off. And actually, I'm going to start with you, Karen. So Karen, in your role with the city of Seattle, you've been involved in a lot of different efforts to promote brain health, including the SHARP project that I just mentioned. So it just launched yesterday. So I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit more about that. And you did send some slides in, and I have them ready for you. So I'll just go ahead and advance for you when you need that.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for that nice introduction. And before I talk about SHARP, I just wanted to provide some background information about ADS and some demographic information. So can I have my slides, please?
Yes, if my slides are big, a little sticky. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. So first of all, Aging and Disability Services is an area agency on aging, and area agencies on aging, also known as AAAs, are mandated through the Older Americans Act. The goal is to, the act was created as a vehicle to organize and coordinate community-based services and opportunities on behalf of older adults, older Americans, and their families. And ADS is the assigned AAA for Seattle and King County. The city acts as the legal contracting authority for ADS. And there are 13 AAAs throughout the state of Washington, over 600 throughout the country. We're all mandated through the Older Americans Act, which means we all pretty much offer the same thing in our communities. We're also mandated to have a 21-member advisory council and in partnership with King County government. And there's a picture of our members. ADS has a budget. Our 2021 budget rather was a little over $82 million. And King County alone, in King County alone, ADS serves about 25% of older adults throughout the entire state of Washington. Next slide. And so a little bit of demographic information. I'm showing this slide because my point that I want to make here is that King County's population is aging. And you see that dark blue line that's going through the middle there? That is the 85 plus population. And that population, the 85 plus, is projected to increase by 300% by the year 2050. And I believe Michael highlighted some of the projections in his opening talk. Next slide. And so along with that group, with that growth of the total 60 plus population, is a projected steady increase in the number of older adults with disabilities, cognitive impairments, and dementia. I want to define the difference between cognitive impairments, which means that the individual is likely to still function independently with some support in community. Individuals with dementia, with the diagnosis of dementia, cannot function independently. And the red line represents the 60 plus with disabilities. The green line represents the growth in those with cognitive impairments. And the bottom line, the 65 and older adults, the growth in those with dementia. So as Michael highlighted, that number is expected to more than double by the year 2060 due to the aging baby boomer generation, which makes dementia a major public health issue and a challenge for the healthcare system and our economy. And in Washington State, about 120 people have been formally diagnosed with dementia. In King County, that number is a little over 30,000. And just to reiterate what Michael highlighted, Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the country. It's the 3rd leading cause of death in King County. And about 2/3 of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's are women, and African Americans, as Michael highlighted, are 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia compared to white counterparts. Next slide. And so as Dinah talked about the SHARP program, SHARP is an acronym that means sharing history through active reminiscing and photo imagery. And it is a culturally celebratory neighborhood walking and reminiscence program for Black older adults. It's a new pilot that targets African-American adults with early stage memory loss. It's a program that fosters brain health and connectivity and a sense of purpose. SHARP aims to maintain or improve cognitive health through physical activity, social engagement, and reminiscence therapy. It also allows older Black adults to be seen, particularly in areas where they have become less visible. Next slide. And the acronym there, ADRD, is Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, which disproportionately affects older African Americans, and so does gentrification. And SHARP was created by Dr. Raina Croft, who spoke at our event yesterday. And Dr. Croft is the Assistant Professor of Neurology from the Oregon Health and Science University. Dr. Croft's work focuses on how culture impacts health, and SHARP strives to honor Black health and history. The 2016 study held in Portland was a 6-month program, and it took place in Portland's historically Black neighborhoods. Dr. Croft has been working with the Seattle planning team since 2021, and we're so blessed and honored to have her working with us. And I just want to acknowledge the other SHARP partners before I move on. That includes the University of Washington Memory, Brain, and Wellness Center, the University of Washington School of Nursing, the Central Area Senior Center, the Washington State Black Heritage Society, the Seattle Parks and Recs Department, and the Washington State Alzheimer's Association. Next slide. So like the Portland study, the SHARP Seattle pilot engages Black older adults age 50 and older in groups of 3. One older adult experiencing mild cognitive impairment or memory loss, and 2 adults with normal cognition. Now in the Portland study, participants had 72 neighborhood walks to choose from. And of course, the study was a 6-month study. For this Seattle pilot, we have 12 neighborhood walks. Each walk is 1 mile in length, and participants will walk during the summer. And I'll say more about that on the next slide. Okay, so this is an example. I just wanted to show what some of the walking routes look like. Again, each route is 1 mile in length. All the routes are located within Seattle's Central District. And the dots that you see there represent locations where the walkers will stop and look at memory markers, which are historical folders. So let me back up. There are tablets that each group of 3 will have. These tablets have all the routes downloading, all 12 routes downloaded on them, and the walkers get to choose which order they want to take each walk. And so they start the app on the tablet. The app will show them which direction to go and when to stop at the markers. So again, for each marker, there'll be pictures because the area has been so gentrified. There are pictures of what used to be there or community members that have prominence that created something there, or a memory of something that stands out. And the walks were determined by focus groups that we held earlier in the year with community members who either currently live in the Central District or used to live there. And we asked them, what's important for you to remember? What do you want to highlight on these walks? And so the themes of these walks, and each walk has a theme, is based on the input from those focus groups. And so once they stop and look at the pictures of what used to be there, a prominent member, then they're prompted with questions, which will start the reminiscing and the dialogue. And I should also add here that these discussions are being recorded. They're being recorded, and I think that's how the project gives back to community, because these conversations will be archived for future reference. Next slide. I just wanted to show you a copy of some of the memory markers here. The first image on the left is a picture of the Garfield High School mascot, the Bulldogs. And across the street from the high school was a hamburger joint. It was called the Bulldogs. And so that's the image of one of the workers there with the mascot. The second image is of Gideon's drugstore, which was located on 22nd and Madison. I remember walking past that drugstore as a child on my way to Mount Zion Church with my grandmother. And so I have fond memories of buying, penny and nickel candy in the drugstore and being greeted by Mr. Gideon. And Mr. Gideon was a Seattle businessman. He was also the pharmacist in the drugstore, and he was a pioneer in senior housing. And lastly, the third image is a picture of Mrs. Green. Mrs. Green and her husband were Black entrepreneurs in the Central District in Seattle and very active members of Mount Zion Baptist Church. Next slide. And so as Dinah mentioned, the kickoff event was held yesterday. And I'm showing this slide because I want to emphasize that there are still opportunities to participate and take these walks throughout the Central District. If you'd like to walk in July, we ask that you please RSVP and register by June 30th. That's next week. If you'd like to walk in August, we ask that you register by July 15th. And then if you'd like to walk in September, we ask that you register by August 19th. Next slide. And so just to wrap up, this is my last slide. SHARP is a 12-week pilot. Walkers in groups of 3 will walk 3 times a week for 4 weeks. So just to make it clear, you won't be walking over the 12 weeks of the program, but you will walk the 12 routes 3 times, during the month, and walking your groups 3 times a week. To register, we ask that you contact Anthony Cryer, who is the social worker at the Central Area Senior Center, and his phone number is there, 206-726-4926. And back to you, Dinah. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I think at this time, I'm going to take the slides down so we can all kind of just participate in a conversation. So give me just a moment to do that. Great. So yeah, so as Karen mentioned, I got to go to the Sharp kickoff yesterday, and it was a really, really cool to see it taking shape. And one of the things that I took away was, as Dr. Raina Croft, the researcher who pioneered this in Portland, pointed out that folks who had participated in the walking program really demonstrated improvements in several different areas: cognitive improvement, they were getting more exercise, they felt more socially connected by the end of their 6-month project. So I thought that was really interesting. So I have many more questions about Sharp, but I'm going to turn to Charlie now, kind of in the theme of research. So Charlie, you told us before, and I kind of touched on this earlier, that when you started working in the field of research, you pointed out that there was a lot of slowness to focus on the lives and health of LGBTQ older adults. So I would like to know from you, kind of, what impacts do you think that had on people's lives, the fact that research hadn't been advanced in that space, and are things changing today?
Well, thank you for those questions, Dinah, and thank you to the City of Seattle and to all the participants for allowing us to be here today. One thing we do know is that in social groups, larger sociocultural norms, dynamics, and things like that are often magnified and sometimes distorted. So in the larger community, ageism is probably among the last acceptable forms of discrimination and marginalization. And then within the queer community, that becomes kind of distorted and magnified. So we're very focused on young people and youth, and absolutely we need to be, but it's pretty much at the exclusion of midlife and older adults. So one of the places where I've seen this become a real challenge, so for many people, many queer older adults, we don't grow up in queer families, we don't grow up in queer communities. And so it can take us a while to find a community. And then once we do find that community, it's kind of like Dorothy opening the door in the Land of Oz, where it's gone from grayscale to Technicolor with all kinds of cool beings and everything. So you find a place to belong, a place that welcomes you, but then for no other reason, because you're getting older, that very same community starts to reject you. And so what that means is so we have the heterosexist marginalization, then we have the ageist marginalization. And so things are changing. So like I mentioned to you when we were talking the other day, when I started my PhD program, it was relatively easy to stay on top of the research around LGBTQ plus aging, but that has just really exploded in the last 10, 12 years. And now you can probably read 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and still not be able to stay on top of things. I think one of the things that's really important, one of the way things are changing, is we're starting to recognize the need for more intergenerational programming. So LGBTQ plus older adults have a lot of accumulated wisdom. We went from sickness and perversion to pride and liberation. We managed to get through the AIDS pandemic and everything. But there's always been this generational chasm within queer communities. And young people have these amazing ideas, they've got the energy, they have the passion and everything. And so we've got these two halves that could make a really amazing synergistic whole, but it's really difficult bringing the two together because of ageism on the one side and youthism on the other side.
Thanks, Charlie. That's really interesting. Do you have just a follow-up to that? So it's interesting to think about these two halves, each having a piece of the puzzle and this, decades of experience and wisdom and this youthful energy. Do you have any strategies, or have you seen successful strategies to marry those two?
Yes, there is some initial movement. I was actually at the University of Washington in Seattle for my doctoral program. And just as I was leaving, I don't remember which organization it was, but they had developed what was going to be an 8-week workshop. And it was, I forget what they call it, but it was essentially bringing together some queer older adults and some queer younger adults who agreed to hear each other and agreed to commit to this 8-week process. And so, as in any dialogue process, it can be difficult at first to get past those stereotypes. But once we get past those, it was really a successful program. And I'm going to make some stereotypical remarks here. I apologize in advance. As an older adult, I can have stereotypes about younger people, and I need to set those aside. And I think the same goes the other way. So SAGE, which is Service and Advocacy for LGBTQ plus older adults, it's a national organization. A few years ago, started what they called SAGE Table. And what it is certain days of the month throughout the year, different agencies and programs set aside a time and a space for older people and younger people to come together and have a meal. So there's no agenda, no one's trying to prove their point, or that we're more marginalized than you, or you're just young whippersnappers, or any of that stuff. It's just a low stakes place just to start having conversations. And it actually has started producing some really promising results. And we're starting to see, we're seeing more of it in Europe than in the United States, but we are starting to see agencies bringing in both younger and older queer people to volunteer in intergenerational programming. And that seems to be taking off also. So back to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing those examples. And it's a good segue to Lionel. So Lionel, you run a support group that I'm guessing may or may not be intergenerational. So maybe you can enlighten us about that. And my question to you is, Charlie shared a little bit about some of the unique challenges facing LGBTQ older adults. How do you see that show up in your support groups? What unique challenges is that community facing when it comes to living with or caring for someone with dementia?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Dana. At the beginning, as you mentioned, I'm a volunteer. We're facilitating for the LGBTQ caregivers for their relatives or family members who have Alzheimer or dementia. So it's we revived it a couple of months ago. So far, we do notice there's some unique common challenges shared by our members. There's a couple of examples. First of all, for example, a higher percentage of LGBTQ couples do not have children or offspring. And so when, many of my, some of my members, they are the sole caregiver to their partner who have been together, for 3 or 4 decades. And unlike, probably that just more likely this will happen. And they have a smaller supporting network compared to their straight counterparts. So, and we know, caregiving can be very stressful, and they just have to, this means that there's more burden, stress, or burnout for these caregivers. And many of them, they have to juggle their day job and give the care to their spouse or partner. And there's another common theme we notice is that, in a family among the children, if a child is LGBTQ, they are probably more likely not married or not having child. So think about, among all the siblings, you are the one who, or among the siblings, they may think, oh, because you are not married or you don't have children, you probably have more resources to share. So probably if their parents have Alzheimer or dementia, so these LGBTQ children may take more responsibility to take care of their parents, making more, no matter sacrifice or give back to their parents. They often will experience, more stress or burden to giving care to their parents. And another thing, want to point out, even though we live in a very progressive state and super progressive region in a very progressive state, but still the costs will have come a long way. But still, there will be some microaggression. That's why many of the when people find our group, they will share that they are very grateful to find this group because sometimes, especially among, I'm probably stereotyping too, among more senior generation, when people share they are giving care to their LGBTQ partners, they may experience microaggression towards these groups, so they may prefer to not sharing this information or just disengage from these similar social support group. So that's a three common theme we have observed by far. Of course, there will be more, but generally, people give more care to their LGBT partners, taking more burden, or LGBT children often will take a bigger share to give care to their parents, or people just experiencing more microaggression because they are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Back to you, Dana.
I know. Such a good reminder that caregiving so often also happens by older adults. So it's not just younger people taking care of older adults, it's often the spouses. And it sounds like in the LGBTQ community that might be even more true.
Yes.
Thank you. I never had made that connection, so I appreciate you elevating that for me. So Karen, so you shared some background about the SHARP program, but I know that in addition to SHARP, you've also worked on several other programs aimed at supporting caregivers and those living with dementia within the African American community. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about, so two things I'm aware of are the African American Caregiver Forum I believe it's called Legacy of Love, as well as Memory Sunday, which I think is happening now-ish. And so can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure, thank you. Memory Sunday happens in June during Alzheimer's and Brain Health Awareness Month. It typically takes place on the second Sunday in June, but can be recognized in any Sunday during June. And it's an annual awareness campaign or event on Memory Sunday or Sabbath. We do have Seventh-day Adventist churches that have participated too. And the churches that participate, they provide education on Alzheimer's, on prevention and treatment, on research studies, and caregiver support. And this year, Memory Sunday was recognized on June 12th, but again, can be on any Sunday during June. And this year we had 15 churches participating in Memory Sunday in Seattle and King County. So I believe this kind of outreach is important, again, because as highlighted earlier, African Americans are 2 times more likely to develop cognitive decline, due to health disparities.
So I guess one question, not to put you on the spot, but Karen, can you tell us a little bit about why that might be true? So that number really sticks out at me, that African American elders are more than twice as likely to develop dementia as their white counterparts. So can you share some of the factors that contribute to that?
Well, it's a discussion of social determinants of health, you know, it's where we live. And of course, racism is a big part of that. And because of that, it's limited access to, you know, quality health care and other services that can, you know, enhance our well-being. And so I'd start there with, you know, the social determinants of health. That's education, where we live, what we eat, what we have access to, and, you know, healthcare that's provided. So, and the racism has, you know, impacted, you know, our access and our quality of life and longevity. So I also forgot to mention the Caregiver Forum, which you highlighted, and that takes place in November during Family Caregivers Month. And that forum started off being a forum primarily for caregivers whose loved ones were experiencing, you know, cognitive decline. But over the years, it's evolved to serving not only that group, but also caregivers who help their loved ones with a whole range of chronic illnesses. And this coming November, Dr. Croft, the creator of the SHARP study, will be the keynote for the forum. So all are welcome, and the forum is scheduled for, it's a Saturday afternoon, and this year will be November the 12th.
Thanks for that. So hearing what Karen said makes me think about kind of the systemic racism and institutional barriers that some communities face when it comes to healthcare and healthcare access in general, but particularly brain health. I think I read somewhere that African-American elders tend to be diagnosed later with Alzheimer's or dementia than white people. And I'm wondering, maybe Charlie, this is a question for you, if that might be true in the LGBTQ community, if you know that answer to that. And then, so that's part A. And then part B, I guess, question for you, Charlie, is, you know, I'm thinking about policies and how those impact our lives. When Lionel was talking around older adults LGBTQ people who may be living alone or may not have offspring, and how policies around marriage equality may have impacted that. And Charlie, I'd like to hear from you, what policy changes do you believe have made a positive impact on brain health and quality of life of LGBTQ elders? And what work kind of remains to be done?
Those are great questions, you know, kind of building off what you were saying, Karen, that I have this metaphor that I call cultural gravity. And it's like gravity, you can't see gravity, but you can't escape its effects. If you don't believe me, try stepping off the roof of your house sometime. Gravity doesn't care what you think. And so social determinants of health are typically classified as economic, physical environment, or social environment, or some combination of all of those. And as Karen was pointed out, the systemic racism in the United States is one of the huge drivers of African-American health disparities. And heterosexism in the United States is one of the main drivers of health disparities among LGBTQ plus populations. We're just now starting to, by just now, I mean the last handful of years, starting to look at dementia and Alzheimer's spectrum disorders in sexual and gender minority communities. And we are seeing those elevated rates of risk and actual experiences of dementia and Alzheimer's disorders. And so it's that chronic stress. So one of the models that we work from in terms of understanding significantly higher rates of not just dementia-related spectrum disorders and Alzheimer's, but also mood and anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, suicidality, all these things that can go wrong do go wrong. And again, it's not because people are queer, having to navigate a highly queer-phobic society, and you just can't really escape that. So I think probably one of the most important policies that most people aren't aware of, A, because it happened about 50 years ago, and B, there's lots of mythology mixed up into it. So the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is like the Bible for the American Psychiatric and Psychological Associations. It's how we diagnose people with different disorders. The very first edition came out in 1952. And in that edition, homosexuality, which at that time sexual orientation had not been disentangled from gender identity, so it was just homosexuality. And that was considered a sociopathic personality disturbance. So just the mere fact that you were queer meant that you had a personality disorder. It was illegal in all 50 states until 1963 to engage in same-sex behavior. So that was then, I think, one of the more recent and probably most powerful, but also one of the trigger ones was marriage equality. One thing that I did not know, so I still in my PhD program, when we started looking at how policies were affecting mental health of older queer adults. And the Social Security Administration has what is called the rule of celebration, or the rule of domicile, not the rule of celebration. And what that means is, so in 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to legalize same-sex marriage or to recognize same-sex marriage. In 2010, 11, somewhere around there, when, I forget the proposition number, but when marriage equality went on the ballot in Washington state, at that point, I think 8 other states had also enacted legislation recognizing same-sex marriages. But what the rule of domicile says is, okay, you can go to Washington state and get married, and then you can go home to Texas. And if Texas doesn't recognize that marriage, Social Security doesn't recognize that marriage. So you were cut out of all of those benefits that intimate couples develop over a period of a lifetime. Also doing that research during that period, one of the things we learned, and this comes from the General Accounting Office from the United States government, was that with legal marriage comes 1,169 rights, privileges, and cool stuff that you get just because you're married that you don't get if you're not married. So things like being able to inherit real property from your spouse without it being taxed, survivors benefits, widowers benefits, things like that. And these also accumulate over time. So an opposite sex couple that's been married for 20 years and has been paying into Social Security for that 20 years is going to have a very different retirement landscape than a couple that's only been married for 2 years. And so hasn't had that time to accumulate. The downside of this is that many people are under the impression that marriage equality was a magic wand. And so now that there's marriage equality, everything's good, everything's hunky-dory. And things are better, but they're not hunky-dory. One policy that we absolutely need to get passed is the Equality Act. So currently there are no federal protections for sexual orientation and gender minority in terms of employment, housing, and public accommodations. It has come up before Congress pretty much every year for the last 10 or 12 years. It never makes it out of the House and into the Senate. The other would be the Older Americans Act. So some of our research, the Goldson Institute, the National Health, Aging, Sexuality, and Gender Study, has been used in an effort to designate LGBTQ plus older adults a most vulnerable population under the Older Americans Act. And what that would do is that would free up additional funding. So as Lionel was pointing out earlier, a lot of times queer older adults are both providing and receiving care from each other, which is great. But if you're 75 and you've got your own health issues and you're trying to assist your neighbor who's 75 and has their own health issues, extra support is really helpful. And so that updating the Older Americans Act and passing the Equality Act would be two very, very important pieces. And I'll just add one more small thing onto that, and then I will stop gabbing for a minute. So back in 2010, 2012, when we were studying marriage policy and things like that, across the country, there were several prospective studies done. And so what this means is they planned out in advance, they figured out what they were going to find, and then they followed it. And what they found was that so they looked at state level data, so the behavioral risk factor surveillance system. And what they found was that in states that passed anti-LGBT laws, so no civil rights protections, no marriage equality, anything like that, at the population level, psychiatric morbidity significantly increased among queer people and their family members. And then, of course, we found the opposite in states that passed civil rights protections, marriage equality, things like that. We saw significant reductions in psychiatric morbidity among queer people and their families. So these higher level policies don't just affect the individuals, they affect their entire social networks. So addressing those policies can give us more bang for the buck, but also recognizing, civil rights has been part of the US landscape for many decades now, but racism is still a factor of life. So you can pass policies, but you also need to change hearts so that you can change minds.
Super interesting. Thank you. And Lionel, I saw you nodding when Dr. Hoy Ellis was talking about partners being cut out of benefits and missing out on some of those benefits. So maybe that sounds familiar to you and your support groups. So feel free to address that, and I'll throw another question at you, which is, so I might combine a couple of these. I want to make sure we have time. So you touched on this earlier, but is there a typical profile of a caregiver that you see? And what does caregiving really look like on a day-to-day basis? So if you could give us a window into that, and especially with that, if that looks different in LGBTQ families or communities, or perhaps not. And then the support groups that you facilitate, are there common themes that come out that people are grappling with, whether those be challenges or also joys? Sometimes caregiving, we talk a lot about the challenges and the burdens of caregiving, but I suspect there might be joys that come with it too. So address that however you'd like.
Probably I'm a more pessimistic person. So what I hear is more about the challenges shared by my supporting groups members. One of the things I would say is, again, normally because there are people still experiencing discrimination or microaggression. So many of the LGBTQ caregiver or family member who have the dementia or Alzheimer, they are more closed in. And like many of the caregivers, they are super lonely, and the person who had dementia is super lonely. For the LGBTQ people are just even lonelier. And that I would say one of the most common themes, just like every, even just other supporting groups, same thing. They are they are more likely to be even more lonely. Yeah, but I think the common traits about the caregiver or the supporting people from the LGBTQ, just like I mentioned, those are the 2 or 3 common groups we have seen, older spouse supporting their old their partners or the LGBTQ. This is a less common. Just LGBTQ children are taking bigger share of the responsibility to take care of their parents.
And Dr. Hoy Ellis, I saw you had your hand up. Do you want to add to that? No, change your mind.
My fingers decided to do a little walking on their own. So sorry about that.
No problem. And I do want to just remind folks on the phone that if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we will relay them to our panelists, so you can get those questions answered. Lionel, do you want to say anything else about kind of what the day-to-day challenges might be that folks are facing?
Everybody probably could be really different. For example, we do see, as you know, some of the group members who joined us is that they are still working full time, but they have to take care of their spouses, or like, you know, say, like Charlie was also mentioned, like, you know, some of the older couple, they also have lots of health challenge. They also have to give the care to their partners. So yeah, it just probably just commonly more challenges compared to their heterosexual counterparts. Yeah, just again, I think overall, what I feel, even when I was spotting other supporting groups, many of us, if we don't have relatives or family member who have the dementia and their caregiver life, we don't understand how much challenges they're experiencing day to day. Only LGBT probably they have more unique challenges, but you know, overall, it's just lots of challenges. Lonely.
Yeah. I recently did a graduate school program myself, and I focused on loneliness amongst older adults. And one thing that really stuck to me was that loneliness cannot be not just an outcome of poor health, but a driver of. And so the physiological toll that being lonely and being socially isolated can take on a person is pretty serious, and highly linked to brain health. So I'm going to, and Charlie, perfect, you took yourself off mute. I was going to go to you next. So I'll let you talk and then ask you a question.
I was just going to chime in that there's pretty solid research that social isolation impacts you both physically and mentally as much as smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day. And like you said, it's not just an outcome, it's also a risk factor. And then when you know, these other systems of privilege and oppression that we've been talking about, whether it's racism, heterosexism, all of the isms, a lot of that is kind of like the upstream causes of this loneliness, which does impact brain health. And you know, that's one of the, where I see one of the larger challenges with aging as an older adult in general, but particularly as a queer older adult, because we're less likely to have children. When we do have children, we're more likely to be estranged from those children. So we can't count on that type of informal caregiving. And then the community that you found and that accepted you and you feel a sense of belonging is now rejecting you just because of your growing older. That really exacerbates that social isolation and that loneliness, which then compounds in all of these other different areas. I do want to add though, you know, for all of the, because I think I share a similar perspective as you, Lionel. I'm not the most optimistic person in the world, but I do think it's very important that we point out that even in the face of all of these health disparities, most LGBTQ plus older adults are actually doing really well. They're doing really well mentally, psychologically, physically, socially, but there's still a long way to go. So I think it's important that we really start looking at resilience factors as well as risk factors.
And maybe that's a good segue for you, Dr. Hoy-Ellis, for you to just tell us a little bit about the current research you're working on. Particularly, I know you're doing some work around gender identity, so would love to hear a little more about that.
Yeah. So I think for myself, one of the most surprising pieces of research that came out of our work, so we did a study, we compared transgender older adults who had served in the military previously to transgender older adults who had not served in the military previously. So full disclosure, I went in with my stereotypical assumptions about the military and the culture of hypermasculinity and everything. And we fully expected that military service to have a detrimental effect on transgender older adults, and we actually found the exact opposite, that transgender older adults who had served in the military when they were younger were significantly less likely to be experiencing depression when they were older as compared to those who had never served in the military. So I think it's a great example. You know, often our assumptions are on track, but often they're not on track. And so we need to be aware of that. And so, you know, I think to me, this is an important piece because, so just like don't ask, don't tell used to be the law of the land with all of its problems, it's only just been recently that, because we keep getting this back and forth yo-yo with openly transgender non-binary people can serve in the military, they can serve in the military, they can serve in the military if they're not out, you know, just makes it really crazy. But what we're showing, because if military service is actually, can be a protective factor for mental health in later adulthood, denying people entry into the military when they're younger is actually putting them at on a track for disadvantage when they're older. Now, I'm not into the military myself. I recognize, at least intellectually, a need for it. But yeah, we're finding things that we didn't expect to find, and often what we're finding is more positive. So we've been recently doing a study on gender-based violence. So we know that in the general population, somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 women will experience gender-based violence at some point in their life. What we're finding out is that bisexual and transgender women appear to even be at greater risk for gender-based violence than straight women. And so trying to figure out what's going on there. So unfortunately, gender-based violence is, it's not restricted to the heterosexual community. But it's an important place to look. But I think, you know, we're doing great. I think, you know, one thing that Seattle can do, which is already done, is really increasing the visibility of queer older adults. If you don't see yourself reflected in the world around you, that sets you up for a certain mindset. But if you do see yourself represented in the world around you, that sets you up for a different mindset. And it can kind of go down to, you know, that very elemental feeling of belonging, and knowing that people recognize you and that you matter. So I think that, so I did put something in the chat for Gen Pride. You know, we also have the Goldson Institute, lots of other organizations and things out there. So the more visible queer older adults become, the more typical we become. I don't like the word normal. The more typical we become, and that's better for our mental health.
Thank you. That's good advice for those of us who work for the city to be hearing. And I guess maybe Lainel and Karen, I'll ask you the same question, which is, what advice do you have for the city of Seattle in terms of supporting the communities we've just talked about? So maybe Lionel, I'll go to you first. Karen, I know you work here, but I'm sure you've got some thoughts.
Again, I'm relatively too new to learn more about the dementia or Alzheimer. And the more I learn about it, I believe, it will be great cause for our community to become a dementia-friendly community. I think that can be one of the goals. I see the work piloted by or, initiated by Karen. That's a great thing for us to do. And, as a dementia-friendly community, probably, one of the things, if you don't know anybody who has dementia, educate yourself more. And I think our city can give more spotlight on these resources and set up more programs like SMART. I think that's awesome just for us. And also just more of our daily citizens, probably just, if you can contribute and send in more. And as it's just great for us to, because if you're older people, probably you experience very likely the sad thing, you experience it. And if you're younger people, share more love, probably if you're lucky, you'll get old. If you get old, very, very likely you will experience dementia someday, one form or another. So that's my thought.
Cool.
Yeah, speaking of typical. Karen, on to you.
Okay, so I do have some thoughts about this. And I think something that the city could do is training. Can't say that enough. For businesses, banks, restaurants, libraries, for all aspects. I think that, we need to realize that even with dementia diagnosis, there's still a lot of capacity that individuals have, and they should not be written off as not being able to do anything, but sit at home. There's still a lot of capacity. And again, like the SHARP program, connectivity and being social is good for our brain health. And so we need, a dementia-friendly community will provide those kind of opportunities. Restaurants, I know, can create space for families with family members who may have dementia. Maybe they, sit in a special part in the restaurant, or, come at a certain time, but there are many things that businesses could do. And I think training and building awareness among businesses in the community is the first step. And I just want to point out that I talked about the capacity that people with a diagnosis of dementia may have. Involve them in some of these decisions, of how communities can become more dementia friendly.
Thank you for that. And I see some resources being popped in the chat. Thanks, folks. Lionel or Karen and Charlie, if you have resources that you're not already putting in there, feel free to shout them out and we'll get them the links in the chat. And there was a question from a participant, and maybe I'll let us close out with this question unless others have burning questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll check Facebook as well. So this question comes from Kayako, and she is asking, or she or he is asking, I always think how to give old people a real motivation for them to start a day that's saying to themselves, I don't want too late for that. I think I'm going to try to interpret this question. So Kayako, apologies if I get it wrong, but I think at the heart of this question is what might be helpful to motivate older adults to potentially do some of those things that we talked about that might be helpful for brain health, whether that's staying socially connected or getting some exercise or kind of, feeding their lives in a way that promotes brain health. So I'll throw that to all of you, and I'll also invite you to share anything else that you want to say at this time before we wrap up. Let's see, maybe Karen, let's start with you. We'll kind of go back around.
Okay, So there is something I do want to say about brain health, and that's the importance of the modifiable risk factors, something that we've all heard about. But I just want to emphasize, that to take care of our brains, let's keep our bodies moving and regular exercise. Let's make sure we're getting enough sleep and good sleep quality. And of course, good nutrition. There are many diets out there to follow, that low sodium, low carb, the DASH diet, the Mediterranean, and there is a MIND diet too. And avoid food with high fat and zero nutritional, value. And again, positive and regular social connection. And, challenge your brain. There are a lot of brain health exercises out there. Learn a language, a different language, more reading. Cooking is even good, meditation and prayer. And then there are a lot of games out there that are challenging too. I just started Wordle a few days ago, and I'm starting to like it, but it is challenging. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Charlie, let's hear from you.
Well, I certainly want to second everything that you said, Karen. From my perspective, so in addition to all the other stuff I do, I also teach advanced social work practice with older adults. And one of the assignments I give my students is to interview two older adults through a narrative perspective with a focus on generativity. So when I started out earlier talking about this generational chasm in the queer communities, and older adults, we're the ones that lived through Stonewall and AIDS and everything else. One of the most important, powerful ways of feeling like you still matter is through this generativity, this idea of giving back, of making things better for the next generation. I've got all of this wisdom. I can't take it with me. And in a sense, you're being robbed if I'm not giving it to you. But that requires a lot of openness and willingness to be in some very uncomfortable but brave spaces. And so I would say, if you can find a place to volunteer, and even if it's on the internet or something. So one of our queer organizations here in Salt Lake City, because of COVID, we had to shut down a lot of our in-person, face-to-face things. So we developed what's called a friendly visitor program. And so people who are feeling lonely or isolated or something can fill out an application, and then a queer older adult who's gone through some, basic training and stuff, enough to be just a supportive friend and listener, either on the telephone or via Zoom or something like that. So people feel like they're still part of the community.
Thank you. I see a parallel between what you just said about generativity and the fact that Karen's SHARP program, part of the program is to record stories and pass that knowledge down and to add to the body of wisdom that's out there. So Lionel, I'll give you the final word here.
That's pretty.
No pressure.
So I would say, generally just, again, have sometimes probably you just take a leap of faith. If you need help, probably reach out. We have a great community here locally. There will be, very likely there will be people want to help you. And if you are from LGBTQ community, just, reach out. There will be some people like me, we always want to help, help you or help our future selves.
Talk about generational. Well, with that, I think I'll close us out. I know we have a few city announcements, so I'll ask so everyone is welcome to stay on the line, and we're going to share some resources that are available, but our panelists are off the hook, and we will promote our city colleagues to be the new panelists. But really, thank you all for being here. I know I learned a lot. This was a really interesting conversation. Thank you for the work you do in this space and advancing our world in so many different ways. So really appreciative of the three of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So with that, I think we're going to highlight Emily from the Seattle Public Library. So this is a perfect segue to the question of how can people keep their minds and brains sharp and stay connected. And Emily is all about lifelong learning. So I'll hand it to you, Emily, to share what's going on at the library.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists. It was such an intriguing day today, actually. Listened to the entire thing and did not do any work. So thank you for that. I am Emily Billow. I'm the new Older Adults Program Manager with the Seattle Public Library. And I've just a few quick things before everyone heads out. The first one that we will be hosting this month and then all through the fall is going to be our Silver Kite Intergenerational Art Programming. We will actually have it twice a week now, both on Saturdays and on Mondays. We'll cover a variety of topics, including art, cooking, movement, and a bunch of different other ones. Right now, we will have the link dropped in the chat. You can look at all of the July classes. The password is SPL, all caps 2020. And if you go to our spl.org, you can also find all the events listed on our calendar. The first few classes are beginning drawing, Bollywood dancing, and storytelling through hula. We are restarting our Medicaid Made Clear presentations. These workshops will provide an overview of the different parts of Medicare, Part A, B, C, D, and the Medicare gap plans. They'll go over what they cover and how they all work. We'll have lots of different discussions on different ways that you can receive the benefits, including the pros and cons of each and approximate costs. We'll also go over the enrollment process and eligibility guidelines. The goal of this program is to meet and provide useful information that you can put yourself in a better position to make informed decisions on your Medicare coverage. Our first presentation of the year is going to be on July 26th at 4 p.m. It's going to be held over Zoom. We are hoping to potentially move some to in-person at our branches later this year. So we have another 2 scheduled if you cannot make that one. And the link is also being dropped in the chat. I just wanted to say happy Pride Month for everyone. The library is going to be in the Seattle Pride Parade this Sunday with our bookmobile. So be sure to come on down, check us out. There'll be lots of really great events happening all over the city. And I really encourage you all to be there and attend. Give us a wave if you do see us. And I also just wanted to mention that most of our branches have some sort of Pride themed pop-up. And so just make sure to stop by your local branch and check those displays out. My personal favorite is the Cap Hill branch. They created with the spines of books, an entire bookcase that's rainbow. You can see it from some of the windows. That's actually open and out all year round, but I like to highlight it during Pride Month as it's just a really unique thing that we do here. For more information on any of these programs, our road to reopening and a lot more can be found on our website, which is the spl.org. And you can always give us a call to our Quicks information, and that is 206-386-4636. That can be found online as well. Thank you, Age Friendly, so much for such a great presentation. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to be able to be on these calls and also get to hear about what's happening around the city and through different organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And I should also mention that we do these programs really in partnership with Seattle Public Library. So it's good to see Emily and do this work together. And we've got one more announcement from some colleagues who are in the utilities department. So this may not be something you think about connected with older adults, but older adults certainly use utilities and have had access to a bit of a discount. So I'm going to invite our colleague to join us. And I know she's on the phone, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see her slide and let her take it away. Oh, I can't share. Oop. Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. So just pulling up your slide.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much. And apologies, I couldn't join via the web. So we just recently moved offices and our new office is having connectivity issues. So apologies for that. Should I start?
Yeah, you can't see us, but we're ready for you. So I have your slide up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm Christian. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Advisor for Seattle City Light, and we are currently doing direct outreach to community about our payment plans that we're offering, and also about our utility discount program and emergency assistance programs. If you're not aware, the City of Seattle moratorium on utility shutoffs expired on April 15th, and we sent out notices to community members about this. And then options that we have available to community to apply for assistance. We just want to make sure community members are aware that, you know, we have these opportunities to get you all caught up on your utility bills. And the short and long-term payment plans are very flexible. Our customer service reps definitely work one-on-one to figure out what is the best payment and plan to set you up with. And then there's also, again, as I mentioned earlier, utility discount programs and emergency assistance programs available that our customer reps would also be able to work with you all if that is something that community members are interested in. To find out more information, feel free to visit our website at seattle.gov utility bill help or call us at 206-684-3000. There's also assistance in language if English is not your preferred language. And just also wanted to give folks a heads up that we've seen folks be contacted to demand payment for utility utility payments, and we do not contact any of our customers over their phone to demand payment. You'll only be receiving correspondence via mail. So just wanted to put that out there. We want to make sure folks are not getting scammed. And I know Seattle Times wrote an article about that with also just we work together with them to get the word out about that because we did see a spike on that. So just wanted to put that out there. And again, please feel free to call us if you have any questions. And thank you so much, Age Friendly, for just giving us a space to get the word out on this.
Thanks, Christian. Great. And so if folks have questions about this, feel free to drop them in the chat too, and we can always pass them along to Christian and get the answers for you. We've got just 1 minute left, which is perfect time for us to just close out. And I know Karen, our panelist, put this in the chat earlier, but did want to call everybody's attention to the fact that Community Livings Connections is a really great resource for older adults, family members of older adults, people who are caregiving, people who have disabilities, to call and get connected to the resources that you need. So this is available for you. You can call this for free and you can talk to a trained person. I know it can be really hard to navigate the wealth of resources that are out there, but there are resources out there and we can help get folks connected to those. So please do reach out if you just got questions in general. And then last but not least, if you are over 60 years old or 60 or older, or you know someone who is, we invite you to participate in our Gold Card program. So this is a free way for you to also save money. So any older adult 60 and above in Seattle is entitled to a Gold Card, and we can mail one to you. And this gives you discounts at places all around the city, the zoo, the aquarium, the animal shelter has just started offering 50% off pet adoption, which is exciting, as well as a whole range of other services and goods. So feel free to let us know if you want one of these and we'll get one to you. And with that, it is exactly noon. So I will go ahead and close us out and just once again, thank everybody for joining us today, for participating on the panel and for participating as listeners. I hope you learned as much as I did. And we will see you next time on Civic Coffee. So take care, everyone.